My next guest is Max Roach. Max is a children's book author and the founder of JonAyves Learning Club, a personalized learning organization that teaches children's concepts such as long division as early as the age of 3. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Toronto and is certified as a professional in human resources. As a former musician, sharing strategies with Beyoncé and the Rolling Stones, leading a childcare organization as CEO, and working as a consultant for e-commerce tech companies globally, Max values the need to fill the industry gaps by way of disruption and modern solutions. Welcome to the podcast, Max.
Thank you so much, Dana. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, thank you so much for your interest in being on the podcast. And we'll talk about the things that you've done throughout your career and what you're currently working with. But let's start off with tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Oh, 100%. And again, thank you for having me sort of on this podcast. I think this is great. I've had the sort of honor to be on a few podcasts this year. And, this one has been one I've been looking forward to for quite a while. So I really appreciate it. Out of the trenches, this is really interesting. So I think my life has sort of been something that has moved in a direction where I think the trenches are very important. And sometimes, in fact, I would almost, yeah, I'd say sometimes we decide our trenches. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, we are placed in situations where they're meant to make us stronger. Sometimes it's really unfortunate in the situations that we're put in. I think myself personally, sometimes I seek out these
Mm-hmm.
trenches because I
Mm-hmm.
feel as though I need a little bit of uncomfort or discomfort within my lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
to really see what comes out the other end. So I have many stories on this. I can think of one specifically with when it came to my career.
Mm-hmm.
So, just as a little bit of a overarching story, I went to school in one in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
and then again in Toronto when I finished my Bachelor of Arts at Toronto. Now, this was a specialty in music. And what was interesting here is that I did end up traveling as a musician for quite a few years. And it was a fantastic experience, right? Meeting all kinds of people, many different types, celebrities of some sorts, and just really enjoying being in front of many people, knowing that I was contributing to entertainment parts of their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are fun times, right? However, you have these things, these beings called children, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they come along and they sort of change the way that you think. And I think what was fantastic for me in that sense was that it really changed how I wanted to live life and what I felt was important. And this was one of the trenches that I guess I sort of threw myself into, was actually picking up the phone and calling all of my employers, everyone who any artist that I was playing with,
Mm-hmm.
any of the, let's say I was playing with different bands and whatnot, different, maybe they were wedding bands, maybe they were different corporate music bands, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
may be, and saying, I know that I didn't tell them that they're my main source of income, but of course I know that you're my main source of income, but I am going to change my trajectory and I need to focus on my children. And
Mm-hmm.
from that point, I believe that was 2015 or 2016, around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And basically I'd cut off all of my income because I needed to be at home. I needed to be with
Mm-hmm.
my children. And this was actually a pretty tough time for myself. I was, picking up any job that I could. I was
Mm-hmm.
driving Uber.
Mm-hmm.
I took transcription jobs. I'm a pretty fast typer, which it's one of the skills that I actually pride myself on. I don't really have many,
Yeah.
but that's definitely one of them. And but I ended up, I was typing, for, writing out, insurance documents and all these things,
Mm-hmm.
to the
Mm-hmm.
point where my elbow was just giving me all kinds of problems, but picking up anything I could. And
Mm-hmm.
during that time, I was really focusing on, okay, how can I contribute to the world in the way that I really love to and still be with my children? So I
Mm-hmm.
decided, right out of music, why don't I just make some bread? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, actual bread. So I actually created a bread product that I got into quite a few local grocery stores in the greater Toronto area.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was starting to grow that business, which of course turned into, well, now I'm not spending time with my children anymore again,
Mm-hmm.
because as you're growing a business, you sort of need to figure that out. But those time periods of making the change that is important for yourself and that that you have to make for others that are close to you, be it your children or your family or whatever it might be, it puts you into a place where you really need to fight to get out of these trenches, right? And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important that people do take the situations that they're in and realize that it is a trench and that trenches can be dug out of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it
Mm-hmm.
actually makes you stronger to be able to come out of that. So that was one example, I guess, of, just completely stripping myself of my career and going into something completely different for the betterment of my family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you realized that the bread business was taking too much time from your family. So where did you go from there after did you end up selling the bread business to somebody else then? And did you go directly to what you're doing now, or was there something in between?
Oh, of course, yes. So I guess to give a little more context to this, there's always context to stories, right?
Yeah.
So some context to that. Uh, Before I went into music, I mean, I've been playing
Mm-hmm.
music for quite a
Mm-hmm.
while, right?
Yeah.
Since I was a child, my dad was into music. I was playing music in church. I was, playing in bands and things like that in high school. And however, I was always doing things like building websites and
Mm-hmm.
doing graphic
Mm-hmm.
design, throughout high school. I really enjoyed it. So I ended up getting into computer science in
Okay.
university. So that was
Mm-hmm.
my very first year of university, was going to computer science. And so what I realized is that, I didn't really want to spend my time looking at a blank screen for the rest of my
Mm-hmm.
life writing
Mm-hmm.
code, right?
Yeah.
And filling it up with, jargon or syntax or whatever you may want to call it. So I felt as though throughout that first year of being in computer science, I really needed to find something else. And so I think it was my
Mm-hmm.
mom that found a college for me across Canada and said, "You need to go do something. Go play music." So I got into that school
Mm-hmm.
and did music, and so that computer science training, it actually led me into a position that I landed after the bread business. So
Okay.
what the bread business gave me was the understanding of how business works, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was able to start acquiring customers, what that looked like, right? What it looked like to start getting funding, what it looked like to hire people on board and work with other individuals and issue tasks and do all these
Mm-hmm.
things, right? So going into post bread business, I got into this company that was actually still alive today and is a multi-million dollar software organization. So I was the director
Mm-hmm.
of operations at that organization. And that was a big leap because I hadn't done computer science for probably about 10 years.
Okay.
And I didn't really know much about the industry. So I
Mm-hmm.
needed to learn everything I could. Now, the reason that I got hired on was because I had, pursued computer science in the first place, but also because I had run a business. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have gotten that job if I wouldn't have, again, found myself in the trenches going
Mm-hmm.
into a new path in a new direction. And sometimes I could have never seen or imagined or predicted that I would be in a position running operations for a multi-million dollar organization and then
Mm-hmm.
consulting
Mm-hmm.
for other organizations as well. Who would have thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
once you put yourself in a position that forces you to make change, change happens regardless of
Mm-hmm.
if you like
Mm-hmm.
it or not, right?
Sure.
It's just kind of better if you get to control it. So that's where I ended up going after that. And of course, that goes into further things that eventually ends up in education, because through that organization, we actually started to administer scholarships to
Okay.
universities around the world.
Okay.
So we'd be visiting, universities such as University of Trento in Italy, and
Mm-hmm.
University of, we'd go to Amsterdam, we would go to Edinburgh, and all these places, and we were getting into the education system, and I really, really enjoyed kind of going through that process, because the thing with administering scholarships is really interesting, because these PhDs and postdoctors and
Mm-hmm.
postdoctoral sort of researchers and whatnot, they do a lot of work and they don't actually make that much money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And let
Yeah.
me tell you, these are the people who are creating our iPhones. They're creating our Android devices. They're creating all the research behind all the AI that's happening these days. And, I guess they get to write some papers and get them published. That's fine. And then after maybe they're done everything, they may go and work for a Google or a Facebook and all these companies. But
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to help them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was I actually really liked this feeling of going in and supporting education. So that was
Mm-hmm.
really, I think, the birth. I wouldn't say the birth. It was the continuation of the education portion of my life, which actually
Okay.
started with my children, is what I found.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you said around the pandemic, you and your wife decided to form an organization because you saw that was it your youngest child or your oldest was starting to learn long division already at age 3?
Yeah. These were interesting times.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
here's some more context.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I really made the decision once our children were born that we wanted to ensure education was at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order to do this, of course, it takes a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you have, you know, any sort of learning materials in place. Again, we weren't necessarily educators, you know, at the time, but we understood what it took in order to approach mastery into
Mm-hmm.
something. Again, you know, this idea of practice, I think, is very important coming from the music landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do things with repetition, you know, those who can think of the term muscle memory, then it becomes a part of you, right? So why not apply this to anything else? So we applied it to teaching our children how to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
One of these things being long division, right? So our oldest daughter right now, she's 9. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, at the time she was able to read by the time she was about 1.5. I don't even think she could walk yet. She decided not to crawl, by the way. She skipped that.
Mm-hmm.
She was kind of on the floor, then she started walking one day. So, you know, before she could walk, she was reading, right? It's amazing. Right. So we said, you know, through our tactics, of course, there was a lot of digital tools, which people may or may not like, but it is what it is, right? That's the beauty, I think, of having things like YouTube these days, is that we can actually curate content positively, which I would love that people would definitely consider more of. Is no matter what content you're consuming, just make sure that it's positive content, because I think it works across the board for any age, no matter what. And so with the combination of this and the combination of understanding what approaching mastery looks like, and the understanding that practice is so important and repetition, we were able to teach our children their times tables very early and how to do these processes such as double-digit multiplication, because they're just processes. Once you understand the process, then you can do the work, right? Then you just implement the process. So long division is just a process. So we did it once, and then we said, okay, great. And then we had another child. Then we said, well, can we do this again? Can we replicate this? And we replicated it even earlier. It was actually unbelievable. So now we're at a place where we're thinking, okay, we have 2 children where we replicated the same process. Can we do this for other children that we don't know, or maybe are our friends' children, right? And so we continued sort of going through this process of kind of planning out the entire company at this point, right? We're thinking, okay, this is going to be amazing. We got our kids. They're doing these incredible things at early ages. Let's push this in our city. People are going to eat this up, no question. So we went ahead. We bought a billboard in our city, right? We had our name in lights. Our kids are on the billboard, all kinds of things, right? We're putting out all kinds of marketing materials on the radio. We're talking to a bunch of people that we know. We printed all these business cards, all kinds of things, right? We're excited. And this was around April of 2022. Yes. Okay. So April 2022, we had this big launch. Right. We're ready to go. We're ready to kind of bring people in. We're thinking out of pandemic, everyone's going to be excited. Right. And let me tell you, Dana, I've never felt this before, but we launched and we had one person send an email saying, is this something that could work for my child? We were so excited. We hopped on a call and it ended up just not panning out. So effectively, we had 0 interest, right? And this was kind of hard to take because we didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, one interesting piece is understanding what timing means.
Yeah.
And maybe launching something in April when summer's about to hit isn't the best time.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, nonetheless, you still feel kind of down and out, right? Another sort of pseudo trench moment. And again, this was a time after I had left my organization that I was working with, right? As director of operations. I was also actually running a childcare after that as CEO, which I had left as well, which you can also talk about, also helped to launch me into this direction. But it was a low time, let me tell you, both financially and also, you know, motivation, you know, everything, right? And it wasn't until later that year, we sort of still had the idea, but we had kind of let go of it for a while. We were thinking about other thought processes where we ran into someone, didn't know who this person was, and we were actually continuing to do work in public places. So the YMCA, we have the public YMCA here, and you know, our kids would be going and doing karate or going and doing swimming or whatever, and the other child, we would be sitting there doing this math work. And by that point, we were doing algebra with our kids. And so people would always be coming up to us and saying, wow, you guys are really just diligent about this. And so we had one family come up and she said, hey, could you help our child? And I was thinking, I mean, I guess, sure, let's try it. I don't know what you need help with, but we used to have a company and it failed. So, we didn't really know where to take it, but we said, yeah, I'll just kind of work with your child. It's fine. No issue. And so I think we planned a time for the next week. And then we sat down and I was able to teach her something in about 15 minutes. And then she went back to her mom. She's like, mom, this is great. Hey, look at what I can do. Right. And we showed her kind of what we were working on and she was blown away. She said, wow, how did she learn this concept so quickly? I said, I don't know. We've been doing this with our kids for years. So what ended up happening is she ended up telling everyone that she knew. And at that point, I realized that if you're providing something that is truly valuable and you have the right people that are actually telling people one-on-one, or I guess on a what we call hand-to-hand combat, right? We say going from one person to the next, right? Word of mouth. When these people truly believe and have experienced what you have given to them and they treat it as a gift, because I feel like everyone has that gift that they can give to somebody, that they will tell people. Yeah. And they'll tell them with conviction, without a question. So this is sort of what helped us spawn and I guess rejuvenate this idea of, hey, we actually do have something here and we can run a business. And from that point, it's just really flourished and it's been incredible. Thought about many different aspects. We started getting into private schools now. Right? I just had another meeting with a private school today, right? Took them some chocolates and a few things and said, hey, welcome aboard, the whole thing. So I think when people really do feel the value and they can see your passion for it and they can see that you're really interested to have things in place for what you're looking to do, it's, it's unstoppable for anyone who kind of is pushing through towards anything that they'd like to do.
So you're currently located in Brantford, Ontario, and you said you're working with a few schools in Toronto. And because this is a virtual platform, you are expanding into schools in the US.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And so right now we have a few schools in Toronto. Okay. We have a few across Canada as well. Okay. And we have actually a couple in Europe as well. Okay. So the expansion is not really an issue because again, we're virtual. And the other thing is that we're actually, because one of the things that's important to me is creating jobs as well. So we're also creating jobs in that respect too, where anyone can work from anywhere in the world in that respect. And the US is the market. And I'm very excited to be connecting with so many people, and there's so many individuals out there in this space. I've never met a space where people are so passionate and just such wonderful individuals when it comes to why they're in their practice. And I think it's beautiful because again, we're dealing with children. They are our future, as cliche as it sounds, right? But I wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like it was something that I felt completely passionate about. And I know that sometimes in this space for parents as well, it becomes very difficult just to be able to handle, okay, I have my children, they have their education, but they also have hockey, they have basketball, but I also have to go to work. Sometimes I have to work 2 jobs. It's what it is, right? And to be able to provide something, even if it's just some level of conversation, just to say, hey, have you tried this tactic or tried this website or tried doing this like this? Just to see how parents just light up. That to me is quality enough for me, right? So I think that there's a lot of value in this and being able to expand it and finally find a way to scale a one-on-one type of individualized learning that works for children during the school day. I mean, this is one thing that we've really been pushing lately, and it seems to be picking up well, I'd say, to say the least, with a lot of individuals and schools and institutions.
Well, talk to me a little bit more about the focus on the one-on-one learning and how this works during the school day. Like you said, it is a focus of 15-minute sessions, and how would maybe for principal, we're willing to bring this on for a group of students, in terms of scheduling it and setting it up. Is this through an app or a Zoom? How does that work?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, good question. So this is interesting, right? One piece that I found is, again, every school is going to have students in their class that are, maybe above average, in the middle of the pack, and then those who could use a little bit more support, right? Now, generally, from most classes that I've seen, I haven't seen many one teacher to one student classes, right? Usually you're looking at maybe at a minimum of 7 students in the class to upwards of 30, right? I think generally between 15 to 25, 26 is usually what we're going to see in the schools. Because again, you can't, it's very expensive to hire one teacher for every student that needs to learn something, right? Very, very, very difficult to do. So the downside of this, of course, there are many upsides, right? Collective learning is fantastic. Sharing ideas is excellent, right? Learning in a group setting. I mean, we have to learn how to do this anyway, right? Let's say we're at our jobs, right? Wherever it might be, and we go to a meeting, and or there's a talk with our teams and things like that. You know, we need to be able to understand how these group settings work. Now, here's the reality: we're dealing with children, right? And I would argue that adults need this as well, though children, they need someone in their life that's going to give them that full attention, 100% of it. Now, a lot of this has changed. And let me tell you, I was just speaking today about this with another principal that I know. And the one-on-one model has now changed to social media being that one-on-one individual. That everyone, not only children, but think about it. You pick up your phone, and there's this curated device algorithm that's now telling you what you're interested in, right? You might not even be interested in it anymore, but it's telling you that, right? So you can imagine this with children, what kind of effect it has. So unfortunately, right, we have children, we have parents who are doing many different things. We have teachers who have so many things on their plate. Teachers are the best. They're the greatest gifts on the planet. And I feel as though, and when I say teachers, I'm not including myself into this. I'm talking about those who are teaching in the public schools, in the private schools, in the Catholic schools, in wherever it might be, any institution. Thank you for being there because it's so important. We can't, as a teacher, it's very difficult to now handle the, mental health. We have to track this, the diagnoses, whether it's, students with autism, whether it's, those who have different sort of learning and development delays. There is so much to track and keep on top of now these days, right? How is it even possible? I still don't know how teachers do it to actually stay on curriculum. It's very difficult, right? So many things to do. So I'm coming in and I'm saying, not only is it difficult to do, we're seeing that some students, unfortunately, are sort of being left behind, and they may just continue on to the next grade, right? In the next grade, and then it's a slippery slope, right? So I sort of thought, well, I need a way to get into the schools and make sure that kids are learning at the optimal time in the day as well, in order to make sure that this works. Now, during the school day actually isn't even really the portion that is mind-blowing, I guess, right? Learning during the school day, there's nothing crazy about this. It's fantastic. We should always be doing this. It's a bit difficult to compete, like I was saying, with hockey and basketball, soccer, whatever it is. So why not throwing into the school day? Now, what I found is that from doing personalized instruction with children, I don't know, at this point, it's tens of dozens of children a week that I personally handle, and then I have my instructors with others. All they need is 15 minutes. I have some students who I have 45-minute sessions with them, and half an hour of that is hanging out. Now, I'm sure some parents don't want to hear this, but it is what it is. Half hour of that is hanging out. I have 30-minute sessions with students. 15 minutes of that, some of these kids are in grade 1, grade 2. They're under the tables, they're standing on the tables, they're sitting on the desks, they're telling me funny jokes, they're telling me stories. But then somehow they still walk out knowing their times tables better than they did when they walked in. Why is this? Because we're connecting. I'm giving you what you need as a child, as a student, right? And I think that's sometimes the things that, it's not even that we forget this as educators, it's more so that we just don't have the time. Right? We have to get certain things done, and there's 30 other children that need the same things done. So if I can come in on a 15-minute basis once a week, I mean, some schools it's every day, and whatever it might be. I say all you need is 15 minutes. That's where I'm coming from, right? Per week. And if I can just focus on that one piece that is just really tearing you apart, that you can't figure out, perfect, because that's all you need. And then I'll give you a couple tools to just practice just that small little thing. And you would be surprised as to how much that opens up. And I can tell you this from a a performer basis, right? As a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Anyway, for those likely can't see, those listening, I have my fingers up. Every finger, your pinky, your ring finger, whatever it might be, every finger is very important to playing the drums when you're holding a stick. I have to practice moving the stick with every finger individually. And I'm telling you, those small changes is what makes change on the macro. So that's what I'm hoping to sort of deliver, and what I've been delivering to schools as well. And I'm seeing a lot of success in that. And so that's kind of how that 15-minute sort of side of it has been born.
So do you work a lot with math and, like, I would say lower elementary, such as counting by twos, threes, you know, early literacy skills, or are there other concepts for kids in middle and high school that you work with?
Oh, for sure. We do work across the board, kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. Sometimes we work with some educators to help with how, like, our teaching methods, but for the most part, it's with the students. Now, the approach, and I know some people, again, may think otherwise or think differently, but the approach is always the same. And we are really, the foundation for us is the 3 L's.
Okay.
Right. And so that's love it so that you can learn it, and then you can live it. It's those 3 pieces. And the first one is the most difficult and also the most important. Making sure that the child or student actually loves what they're doing. And one of the methods that we do this with is effectively just making sure that we tie the concept to something that's important in their lives. So if someone is interested in soccer, right, and we're looking at mathematical equations, right, things like that, and we want to maybe talk about the trajectory of how a ball might move. Because when you're kicking a soccer ball, there's a certain curve that can go on it, right? And not to get too mathematical and all this, right? But you can calculate these things. So depending on the level of math, if you're an upper high school student, and you're doing some of these concepts, and your favorite sport is soccer, well, this is perfect, because you're always curving the ball when you kick it. Or you're playing baseball, same kind of thing. So once you start to connect the dots as to how this can work within their actual lives, it becomes much more interesting. Right. And then you can start. I don't know if you've tried to learn something without enjoying it, but I know I have, and it is awful. Terrible experience. Right. So these are sort of some of the things that we definitely strive to do. And it's the foundation of our company and of our learning process. Right. And I think, when it comes to the primary grades as well, when you speak on literacy, we have a ton of programs. Right. But when it comes to literacy, I think, again, it's important to it's the same concept. You break it down to the very small pieces, right? And we have so many tactics that we do to do this, and it's incredible. And to be honest, the smaller, I call it the molecular level, the smaller the chunk, the easier to digest. You can think about it as food, as an example as well. When you give a baby food, you don't want to give them large chunks of potatoes, right? Break it down into small pieces so that your body can digest it easier. Right. So it's the same concept that we use across the board when it comes to our practices.
Okay. So for people who might want to be interested in trying this out at home as a parent or in their school, you start off with doing free assessments. And then you would talk to the people about learning strategies. So you said a lot of people are distracted by TikTok, and is this kind of a platform that kind of works with some of those distractions that they're often wanting to go off and do to get them more interested in the subject at hand?
So what I've found is one of the things that I want to make sure that we always do is whenever we're trying to introduce something, that we meet the child where they're at, or we meet the student where they're at, or we meet the person where they're at, right? This doesn't just apply for those who are within school setting, right? Right now, every student, anyone who's kindergarten to grade 12, pretty much, which it's really interesting to think that kindergartners are proficient on devices, right? But it's what it is.
Yeah.
That's where they are. They're on the devices, right? So let's go to the devices then, if that's where you're going to be. I want that whenever a child uses Zoom, they think about JonAyves Learning Club. right?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever a child is on there thinking about something mathematical, they think about JonAyves, because the reason is because if they're not thinking about something that's educational, they're going to be thinking about something that's not educational, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
goal is, let's at least add our side into it as well as
Mm-hmm.
educators, right? So I would say that this isn't necessarily a platform, so to say,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more of a connection that's
Okay.
being built. And really, we're looking to compete with the connection that's being built with social media, which is very difficult. And I think a lot of educators are having the same issues where, a child will be sitting in the classroom. I mean, their head is thinking about whatever they were watching or scrolling through just, at recess or
Mm-hmm.
whenever it might be, right at home the night before. So if digital is where things are at, then let's approach the digital side as well with some education behind it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So you do a lot of these assessments based on math or whatever the need may be. So talk a little bit about, if people were to contact you, how would they get started? And then talk to me about some of the other resources you have, podcast workshops, YouTube shorts, things like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh man. I love YouTube shorts. So fun. Our YouTube shorts are a lot of fun. We actually just went into yesterday, we went into Toronto
Mm-hmm.
and we went to Ripley's Aquarium. I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
familiar with Ripley's, but Ripley's Aquarium, tons of fish everywhere. They had sharks and
Mm-hmm.
all these everything, right? So what we do on some of these YouTube shorts is we'll go around any city. We'll just pick a city. We'll go there if it's kind of near us, and we will challenge random strangers to times table duels,
Okay.
right? So our kids, again, they're 9 years old and 6 years old, right? We'll just surprise people on the street. They'll come up to them all innocent, saying, "Hey, can you help us with our times tables, please?" And who's gonna say no, right? You got these two cute kids skipping towards you, just saying, "Oh, please, can you help us?" And then suddenly it's like, "Flash times tables. What is this? What is this?" And then our kids will say their answers, and then the adults will try to say their answers anyway, right? And
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, right? So we get some people who all everyone is so willing and happy and open. So on YouTube, we have a bunch of those YouTube shorts, and that's at JonAyves
Mm-hmm.
TV. So
Mm-hmm.
JonAyves TV. We also have a bunch of times tables videos. I think you were mentioning kind of talking about counting by twos, counting by fours, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a ton of count by videos, and that's at AJ's House Kids. So
Mm-hmm.
AJSHOUSEKIDS. So those are kind of our two main platforms that we utilize for some of the digital kind of learning. And you can find us on TikTok and Instagram with those tags as well and those usernames. But for our actual program itself, if you go to jonayves.com,
Mm-hmm.
JonAyves.com, you can definitely check us out when it comes to that anywhere, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. All of our sort of online content is there. Talks about our school, talk about our how we get into the different privates and public schools and everything like that. And I think what really makes this interesting for us is that we can actually bring this to the world. And we've
Mm-hmm.
already started to do this. We can actually help children across the world, right? If you have an internet connection, then we can help, right? Instead
Mm-hmm.
of having to think about, okay, well, do we have the right teachers in place? Do we have enough teachers in place? All of these things. It's like, well, listen, teachers are fantastic, but I don't think you could ever have enough teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more the
Mm-hmm.
merrier is how I think about it anyway. So if we can deliver that side of it, then why not, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and of course we have books. There we go. Some non-digital things for those who
Uh-huh.
are
Uh-huh.
interested. On Amazon, you can type in JonAyves, JonAyves, and you can see we've got quite a few children's books on there as well.
Okay, great, great. Well, out of everything we've talked about today on the podcast about your transitions in your career, your trend story, and then finding JonAyves Learning Club and how you all work with students, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
One thing to remember. So don't be afraid of taking small steps.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I see across the board, regardless of age, regardless of the person, that sometimes we feel as though we have to take big leaps in order to
Mm-hmm.
make change, in order to learn, in order
Mm-hmm.
to prove to the world that we're worth something. None of that matters. take the small steps so
Mm-hmm.
that firstly, it's much more enjoyable. Again,
Mm-hmm.
the food reference. Is it more enjoyable to take small bites or to have to stuff your mouth every day? Like, it's very uncomfortable when you have a full mouth of food, right? You can't even chew. So at least chew your food, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's important to take very, very, very small steps. Just chip
Yeah.
away, track that progress. And you
Mm-hmm.
can do this with your children too. Give them small pieces. If they're struggling with times tables, right? Start with 0 times 1.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between 0 times 1 and 1 times 1? Oh, well, 1 is 0, 1 is 1. Fantastic. Just have fun doing that. Draw some numbers. Done. Go back to them next week. They'll remember it because it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
Life is supposed to be simple when we allow it to be that way, right? For
Yeah.
those who are fortunate enough, right? Again, there are always going to be existential circumstances, though try to make it as simple as possible. And it's always going to be in those small, bite-sized, chipping away type of processes that will do it every single time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really important to remember. It's breaking it down, right? It's not having kids expect they need to learn it all in, you know, that lesson or in the next month. So yeah, I think that's really important to remember. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. I'll make sure I put all the links in the show notes. And I wish you success in the upcoming school year. With really broadening the program and having more people really recognize what you're all doing to help kids learn.
For sure. Thank you so much, Dana. I really appreciate this. And yes, hopefully we get to connect again. Thank you.